They thought she was powerless, but she was the most powerful judge in America. The sun had barely risen over downtown when the scene unfolded on a quiet street corner. Officer Daniels and Officer Moore had been cruising the area looking for what they described as trouble. When they spotted a Latina woman stepping out of her sleek black sedan, they immediately assumed the worst. Dressed in a professional suit with a leather case tucked under her arm, she looked nothing like a criminal, but in their eyes her skin color and presence in a wealthy neighborhood made her suspicious. The woman, Judge Isabella Reyes, though, they didn't know her name, had simply parked on her way to a closed-door judicial meeting. As she locked her car, the flashing red and blue lights of a squad car illuminated her face. "Hey, you," Officer Daniels barked, his tone more accusatory than inquisitive. "What are you doing here? This isn't your neighborhood." "Judge." Reyes turned calmly, her expression one of quiet control. "Good morning, officers. Is there a problem?" Her voice was even, her tone polite, but it only fueled their disdain. Officer Moore scoffed, stepping out of the cruiser. "Problem? Yeah, the problem is people like you creeping around where you don't belong." Without waiting for her response, he grabbed her wrist. In one smooth, practiced motion, the cold steel of handcuffs locked around her arms. The crowd that began to gather pulled out phones, whispering, some outraged, some too afraid to intervene. "You have no right," Isabella began, but Daniels cut her off. "Save it for the judge," he sneered, smirking at his own joke, unaware of the cruel irony. She was the judge of all judges, the Chief Justice of the United States, Supreme Court. But standing there in cuffs, surrounded by officers who only saw her ethnicity, her gender, and their own unchecked authority, she chose silence. For now. As they pushed her against the hood of the squad car, Daniels chuckled. "What's the matter, sweetheart? Didn't think we'd catch you?" Moore leaned in closer, whispering loud enough for the crowd to hear. "Bet she's one of those illegals. Probably stole that fancy car." The spectators murmured in shock, but the officers didn't care. They lived for this. The power, the humiliation, the chance to remind someone they considered beneath them of their place. Isabella gritted her teeth but kept her composure. Years on the bench had taught her restraint. Her silence unnerved them. Daniels mocked her stillness. "Oh, you think you're too good to talk to us. You'll be singing once we book you." He turned to the crowd, laughing. "Look at this." Little Miss High and Mighty thought she was untouchable. The word stung the bystanders who knew this wasn't justice, but prejudice masquerading as authority. One young woman shouted, "She didn't do anything." Another man yelled, "Why are you arresting her?" Daniels turned his glare on them. "Keep moving if you don't want trouble." The crowd hesitated, but phones kept recording. Isabella, her hands behind her back, finally spoke, not to them, but to herself. "Every abuse of power leaves a trail," she whispered softly. Daniels sneered. "What was that?" She didn't answer. Her eyes, calm and unwavering, locked onto his. For the first time, he felt a flicker of unease, but he buried it quickly under another cruel laugh. At the precinct, the mockery escalated. The officers paraded her past holding cells, sneering, joking about getting promotions for this bust. Moore tossed her briefcase on the counter and muttered, "Bet this is full of fake papers." But when the clerk opened it, his face paled. Inside wasn't a passport or stolen documents, but judicial briefs, embossed folders marked with the seal of the Supreme Court and a golden badge of authority. The clerk looked up slowly, his throat dry. "Officers, do you know who this is?" Daniels rolled his eyes. "Yeah, some fraud pretending to be fancy." The clerk swallowed hard, then placed the badge on the desk. "This is Chief Justice Isabella Reyes, the highest judge in the country. She outranks everyone in this building, including you." The room went silent. Moore stammered, You're lying." But Isabella finally broke her silence, her voice steady, her presence commanding. "No, he's not lying, and you will answer for what you've done here today." The other officers in the precinct froze, staring at Daniels and Moore as though they had just signed their own death warrant. Daniels tried to laugh it off, but his voice cracked. Well, We were just doing our jobs. Isabella leaned forward, her cuffed wrists still between them. Your job is to uphold the law, not to mock, humiliate, and discriminate. And you've just demonstrated why this country still struggles with justice. Within minutes, news spread like wildfire. The bystanders' videos had already gone viral. Chief, Justice handcuffed by racist cops. The phones in the precinct rang nonstop. The mayor called. The governor called. And finally, the attorney general himself called. His voice thundered through the speakerphone. Release her immediately. Do you fools have any idea what you've done? Daniels fumbled with the keys, unlocking her cuffs with shaking hands. Moore muttered. This was just a misunderstanding. But Isabella cut him off with a look sharper than any blade. She rubbed her wrists where the cuffs had been, then stood tall, her presence filling the room like a tidal wave. "I thought you could strip me of my dignity," she said, her voice steady, resonant. "But dignity is not yours to take. You mocked me for being Latina. You mocked me for existing in a place you decided I didn't belong. But the truth is, I belong everywhere justice is needed. And today, justice will come for you." The officers, who once mocked her, now stood trembling, their careers hanging by a thread. And they knew it wasn't just their jobs on the line, it was their names, their legacy, their family's shame. The disciplinary hearing was unlike anything the city had seen in years. The chamber was filled to capacity, rows of journalists, scribbling in notepads, cameras flashing, and citizens watching with anxious anticipation. At the center of it all sat the disciplinary review panel, a mix of city officials, legal experts, and civil rights representatives. Across the table, Officer Daniels and Officer Moore sat hunched over, their once proud uniforms now looking more like shackles than symbols of honor. Sweat rolled down their foreheads, their hands restless, their faces pale with the dawning realization that their careers and their reputations were hanging by a single thread. The doors opened and the room fell into an almost sacred silence. Chief Justice Isabella Reyes entered, dressed in her black judicial robes, her presence commanding every eye. There was no arrogance in her walk, no vindictive fire in her expression. Instead, there was a calm, solemn gravity, the kind only carried by those who understood the weight of true justice. She did not walk in as a victim. She walked in as a protector of the law itself. Reporters whispered her name as she approached the podium. "That's her, Chief Justice Reyes." The cameras zoomed in, capturing her every move. She set her briefcase down, opened it with precision, and removed a series of documents. She placed them neatly in front of her, then folded her hands and looked directly at the panel. The chairperson of the review board spoke first, his voice tight with formality. "Chief Justice Reyes, thank you for your presence. You may address the board regarding your encounter with Officers Daniels and Moore." She rose slowly, the room holding its breath. Her voice, when it came, was steady, deliberate, and powerful enough to silence even the faintest whisper. "This hearing is not about me," she began, her eyes sweeping across the chamber. "It is not about what happened to Isabella Reyes. It is about what happens every day to people who do not have the privilege of this platform, who do not have cameras to protect them, and whose stories are too often buried before they are ever heard. What you witnessed with me was not an isolated event. It was a symptom of a deeper sickness." Gasps rippled through the audience. The two officers shifted uncomfortably, their lawyers whispering frantically in their ears. But Isabella did not flinch. These officers saw me, and they did not see a judge. They did not see an American citizen. They did not even see a human being. They saw only my ethnicity, only their assumptions, only the prejudices they carry like weapons. Her gaze turned briefly toward Daniels and Moore, who avoided her eyes. They mocked me. They mocked my existence. They mocked an entire community of people who are too often treated as though their dignity is negotiable. The chamber was silent, hanging on every word. Isabella's tone hardened, her words slicing like a blade. "Now ask yourselves, if they could do this to me, the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court of the United States, what do you think they do to the voiceless, the powerless, the nameless, individuals who cross their path? How many young men and women have been cuffed and mocked because of the color of their skin? How many mothers and fathers have been humiliated, arrested, or silenced without cause? How many stories like mine? And without witnesses, without video, without justice? Her words struck like thunder. The reporters scribbled faster, the cameras clicked relentlessly, and the panel members sat frozen in grim understanding. Daniels, red-faced and sweating, tried to break the silence. He stood up suddenly, his voice trembling with forced confidence. This was all a misunderstanding. We were only doing our jobs. We didn't know who she was." Isabella turned slowly, her eyes locking onto him with an intensity that pinned him in place. "And that," she said, her voice sharp, "is precisely the problem. You believed that your badge gave you the right to mock, to humiliate, to abuse. You thought your victims had no power to fight back. You did not need to know who I was to know what was right. Justice is not selective. Respect is not conditional. The law does not bend for ignorance." The room erupted in murmurs, the panelists exchanging grave looks. Daniels sank back into his chair, his shoulders slumping as if crushed beneath the weight of his own actions. Moore, pale and silent, looked as though he wanted to disappear. Isabella's voice softened then, though her words carried no less strength. "I stand before you not to demand vengeance. Vengeance is not justice. I stand here to demand accountability, not for myself, but for every person who has ever felt the cold sting of humiliation at the hands of those sworn to protect them. Accountability is the only way to begin healing. Without it, the cycle continues. Without it, the badge becomes a license to harm instead of a shield to protect." The panel chair cleared his throat, visibly shaken. We have heard the testimony. We have reviewed the evidence, including video footage submitted by bystanders. It is clear that the actions of Officers Daniels and Moore were not only inappropriate, but in direct violation of the oath they swore to uphold." He paused, glancing at his colleagues, then continued with a voice heavy with finality. "Effective immediately. Both officers are terminated from the police force. Furthermore, this board recommends that neither shall ever again be permitted to serve in any capacity in law enforcement within this state or beyond." The chamber gasped, a mix of relief and shock. Daniels buried his face in his hands. Moore's eyes filled with tears as he stared blankly at the table. Their careers, once symbols of authority, were gone in an instant. But Isabella did not gloat. She did not smile. She simply nodded, her expression solemn, almost mournful. She turned, once more to the audience, her words now carrying the weight of a promise. "Justice is not about punishing the few who are caught. It is about ensuring that those who remain never forget the responsibility they carry. Every officer must remember that the badge is not a crown. It is a contract with the people. Break that contract, and you break the very foundation of our democracy." The audience erupted in applause, some standing on their feet chanting her name. "Reyes, Reyes, Reyes." The sound echoed through the chamber like a chorus of hope. For the first time, Daniels and Moore felt what it was like to be powerless, to have no voice, no authority, no shield to hide behind. As she gathered her papers and prepared to leave, a reporter called out, "Chief Justice Reyes, what do you say to officers across the nation who are watching this right now?" She paused, looked straight into the cameras, and answered with a calm finality. "I say this: power is never yours to keep. It is only yours to borrow. And if you abuse it, justice will always come knocking." With that, she walked out of the chamber, the thunderous applause following her into the bright light of day. For Daniels and Moore, their downfall was complete. For the nation, a message had been delivered, loud, clear, and unforgettable. Chief Justice Isabella Reyes had not only defended her dignity, she had reminded America of its conscience.